Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Universal podcast, sponsored by the UWI, a social enterprise that is helping to create workplaces where everyone belongs. And today I am joined by David O'Coimin, founder of Nook. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning, Erica. Very well. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. But first of all, I wondered if you mind telling us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. So my name's David O'Coimin, originally from Dublin in Ireland. I'm a product designer, have been basically working on projects for others for most of my almost 30-year career now. But 6-7 years ago, I was working for a very large corporate and I became despondent at the state of open office and I wanted to do something about it. And that's why I created Nook back in 2016.
Awesome stuff. And that kind of answers my next question, which was where Nook all started. And I suppose what I do want to know is what you found, what problem you found needed to be solved that Nook kind of answers.
Sure. Absolutely. So where it all started from was I'd been a global product manager for this very large company. And, product designer is someone who wanders the world imagining better futures and trying to plot ways to get us there. And so I saw this huge problem with how open the workplace had become and how that had become quite toxic for a subset of people. I think, it actually touches everybody, but there's a subset of people who it's really difficult for. And at the time, the only expression I knew really to sort of capture my feeling around that was introverts. I didn't know anything about neurodiversity, neuroinclusivity, et cetera, but I knew that, the open plan office was essentially designed by extroverts for people like themselves. And so that was the problem. And to steal an analogy from a fantastic talk I saw a couple of years ago, if you imagine the workplace is like a theater and the open office is like the stage, you're always on. You're always in the spotlight. There's no escape from the spotlight. But a theater doesn't work like that. A theater doesn't, survive only on what happens on the stage. You can only perform so much. So you need backstage to be able to step off the stage and to be able to take a moment, maybe even still see what's going on the stage, remain in the context of the environment. So essentially what I wanted to do was I wanted to create, if you look at Maslow's pyramid, the essence of our need as humans is shelter. And so I basically wanted to create a little, harking back to my childhood. I loved the space under the stairs. I loved being under the table in my grandmother's house. So I felt that something in particular around psychological safety was missing. And that was the idea. That's the sort of genesis of where Nook came from.
And so from that point, where is Nook today? What does it do? What markets does it serve?
Fantastic question. And it does way more than I ever imagined it would, frankly. I mean, I have all these ideas, and you should see the first sketches of Nook. They have all sorts of singing and dancing, bells and whistles, because I have to admit, I'm a terrible over-engineer of things. But I have learned that I'm an over-engineer. So now I over-engineer, and then I strip things back to their essence. So in essence, Nook is this psychological safe den, and it's now providing that safety for people in workspace, science parks, hospitals, education, sports stadia, shopping malls, hotels. And you can hear from that list, these are spaces you think, wow, what's going on in those spaces that they need Nook? But that's all part of the post-corona sort of hybrid work. Work doesn't only happen now in an office, it happens at home and in third spaces in between. And those spaces are all sort of activating themselves and figuring out that they have a role to play, I think, in the future of work. And another element too, a bunch of years in, we showed Nook off at the Web Summit in Lisbon. and we were asked by a number of visiting event organizers, would it be possible to hire Nooks for events? So now we have over 100 Nooks across the UK, Europe, and North America that we roll in and out of the XL Arena, the NEC, Birmingham, you name it, covered in the brands of, of organizations temporarily, and then back out again. And when they come out of the events, they often go into, instead of putting them in storage, I hate waste. I'm all about sustainability, both economic and social sustainability. So when they come out of events, we partner up with co-working, and they go into the co-working, because co-working, it's a beautiful and really important part of the future of workspace for me, but it also often doesn't have a lot of funding. And we really want to help co-working move forward. So it's great to be able to put Nook into those spaces too. So yeah, that was a big list, but with the original idea of workspace, it's now helping in all of those different environments.
Well, of course, with the events, that's how we found you, was looking for ways of how to make an event space feel more neuro-inclusive and psychologically safe. Giving people a bit of a respite from the busyness of an event environment, because it can be quite overwhelming for some people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think events for me are kind of a micro, environment which illustrates a lot of, the extremes of the world. First of all, they're at the cutting edge of what's coming next in your field. Second of all, you're using experienced designers to craft an experience for people from the moment that they receive the email or they set out on their journey to the moment they leave, and even the aftercare, the piece that comes afterwards. I think events are so important for the economy. And I think if you can really, affect events in a positive way, you leave people with a sense of, optimism, because frankly, I believe that the future in the long term is built by optimists. So you leave people with a sense of optimism for what's possible, with a sense of inspiration, and they go back to their workplaces, with an element of, I've learned some stuff, and we need to do it, and there's things we can start tomorrow, and there's things we can do in a year, but there's things we can start tomorrow. Let's go.
And I know that you've had a relationship with, or are working with, the Google New Project initiative, and they have produced sort of a checklist, a document to kind of give people an idea of what sort of things they can be doing to make events more neuro-inclusive. But do you think those principles can then be taken into the workplace as well?
100%, and I think that is the objective ultimately of that project, starting with events, perhaps for the reasons I just mentioned, because the events are can be a starting point for so many great things. But I think those principles that you see in that document, I found that such an enlightening document too, because it gave us almost like a flag to wave and say, look, not only are the things that you need to know in here, and I want to also mention very quickly the British Standards Institute Design for the Mind document, which is a way less accessible one because it's 80 pages, but it's still almost like a Bible of what's possible. And I think those principles, when you read through them and you think, these are principles for life. This isn't just for events. This isn't just for workspace. This is just, I need to do this with everything. I need to do this when I'm organizing a kid's birthday party. I need to do this with my own colleagues. It's a phenomenal document and is incredibly important. And I think it will form the basis for some really interesting guidance.
Just so we can get in a little bit more detail about the kind of things that we're talking about here, can you give some examples of, perhaps with the Nook pods, what kind of things you add into them that are features that help to create psychological safety?
Absolutely. Well, look, in its rawest form, before we add any special sensory features, what it essentially does is it creates this acoustic comfort and this element of no surprises. And that's an important part of anxiety, is going to a space and being unable to predict how your day is going to be, who's going to interact with you, what's going to happen, and what's going to be going on in the environment and all that kind of stuff. So there's an element of, when you get inside Nook, it removes a whole load of high frequency noise, which is at the frequencies that really disturb the brain the most. There's a reason that we find a hum to be a comfortable thing that we can almost sleep to, and a baby's screech to be something that sends all of our heckles into the highest regions. So, by focusing very heavily on removing high frequency noise and creating this low frequency hum within the space, it creates this acoustic comfort and this almost sort of calmness and serenity comes over you when you get inside. And that's not just me talking, that's evidence now from thousands of Nook across many years and all sorts of different installations. So you get this sort of settling that occurs, this mindfulness that occurs. But then now you have this amazing predictable architecture. Like, the problem with building sensory rooms is every room is different. And every time you go in, you go, okay, what's the room? Where's the light? How many walls? What's the ceiling situation? What's the lighting situation? Can we adjust it? Not the case with Nook. It's always the same. So that means we can design these elements. For example, taking again from partnering with experts in the sensory world, a twinkling fiber optic carpet on the back wall that I defy you to look at it and keep thinking or worrying about whatever it was you were worrying about. It's this extraordinary thought interruption device. Sounds like something from the future, but essentially it's just waves of fiber optics which are twinkling in a way that's reminiscent of looking at the Milky Way under time lapse. And it's got that kind of mesmeric quality to it that can interrupt a spiraling mind, and that can cause this sort of calmness and an opportunity for you to restart your thoughts in a way that you're perhaps more in control of. Or vibrating seat pads, which sounds very fun. Anyone who hears that will chuckle at the idea. But did you know that, if somebody has ADHD, as I do myself, you can be, super fidgety. You've got all this energy. It won't go anywhere. You're grabbing your hands together and you're fidgeting, or your legs are moving and jiggling around. And that actually can prevent focus. That's one of the challenges with ADHD is, you can either have a hyper focus or zero focus. And I'm a zero focus guy. So when you see, this is the extraordinary thing about this. I love standing on the shoulders of these giants who've discovered these things in the past. If the seat is vibrating, that tells the body that it doesn't need to vibrate. It doesn't need to agitate. It doesn't need to, and I say this and forgive the generalization, but it's been shown that it can have this effect. And of course it needs to be adjustable, because for everybody it's different. We couldn't have just a switch and that wouldn't be very pleasant, and that wouldn't be very calming. But if you can start at zero and turn the vibration up to a level that's comfortable for you, then that actually can help you to settle and then bring you into a focused state if you're an otherwise kind of a fidgety type of person. And also the principle of that as well, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is this notion that if you design with extreme needs in mind, you actually create something that benefits all. A vibrating seat pad is soothing for the muscles. So anybody can actually enjoy this sensation of a vibrating seat pad, but some people can really, really benefit from it. It can help them to focus and be more productive in the workplace. And lighting, to just let's limit it to 3 examples to keep it brief, but lighting can have a profound effect on your brain's ability to process information. And generally in the workspace, you have to design for the average. But the truth is that between you and I'm one age, you're another age, and the average is somewhere in between, and neither of us are actually the average. So when you design for the average, you're designing for, fictitious avatar that might not even exist, and you're not really catering for people's individual needs. And I get the challenge of an open plan workplace and trying to light that, and you can't allow people to individually tailor the lighting for their need. We can. We can, because we can say in the Nook, you can tune this lighting, powerful lighting strips or panels or whatever it is you need. You can tune this lighting. For those who are watching, you'll be able to see my lighting now has changed to a purple, which is known as a sort of a calming effect. You can use it as a sort of decompression, but it can also, if you have dyslexia, it can have a profound effect on your brain's ability to genuinely comprehend what you're seeing on the page in front of you. Can stop the words from forming patterns and make it easier to find that next line, and make it easier to read what's in front of you, or to settle your brain down. The dyslexic brain is extraordinarily creative. There's some amazing research out of Cambridge that I'll talk about more when I come to see you guys. But it's illuminated that dyslexia should no longer be considered a disability. It should be looked at as a different ability, because the dyslexic brain is kind of wired for exploration, while the world is designed for exploitation, but exploration is incredibly valuable, and creativity and innovation are all at the core of those things. So light can have a profound effect on, a brain's ability to bring its best self to work, to process challenges, and to be able to interact in an environment in a really good way. So those are the kind of things that we imbue the product with, and we continue to learn and imbue with different things. We have this great environment here. We can predict it, we can tailor it, we do all sorts of interesting technologies inside it, but in its essence is just about having a mindful moment in the middle of the overstimulation.
So what we're really saying is that even people who are perhaps neurotypical could also benefit from these kinds of environments.
Will benefit, absolutely, 100% proven so. It's just this notion that a one size fits all, and the truth is that one size misfits all, because you've heard this before, but it's called a spectrum for a reason. There's everybody has a spidergram, if you want to use a sports analogy, of different strengths and weaknesses, and at a certain point it becomes a diagnosis because it's presented itself in such a way that doesn't fit with what society expects. That's only because society expects certain things, but in actual fact these are extraordinary capabilities that are perhaps being hindered. Your potential is not being allowed to be free in this space. So I think, it's not just about the minority. This is about the majority.
What I think I'd like to know is then what the outcomes are of this. I suppose what kind of gains can organisations, perhaps if they're looking at implementing these kinds of principles into their workplace environment, what can they expect to see in sort of the change in their workforce?
Look, one of the challenges that organizations have is they train people and then people leave. That's a big challenge, and they're really struggling in the war for talent in the workplace. And in the EU, I read a statistic from the European Statistics Office that over 50% of office workers have changed roles in the last 3 years. So there's this extraordinary churn taking place. Something like 72% of people are intending to look for a new job in the next 12 to 18 months. Extraordinary numbers. So why do I mention these things? It's because making a universal workplace, making a workplace more inclusive, putting these principles in place that help people to settle, to feel less anxious, to overcome stressful moments, create a sense of belonging in the workplace, allow people to cast off those anxieties that might be stopping them from doing things like engaging with their colleagues. Engagement is at an all-time low in workplace at the moment. It was measured at something like 20% pre-corona. So God knows what it's at the moment. So, it can foster, these quiet connections. We've talked for years about the water cooler moments, right? This manna of water cooler moments. But genuinely, what is a water cooler moment? It's capturing a moment in between everything else. It's stopping with that, whatever it is that you're deadly focused on, and having a connection with your colleagues. So I think it's two sides. It's one, it's been able to get into deep work for long enough to achieve your objectives. So if you're deep into a spreadsheet or deep into writing a report or deep into programming and you get interrupted, that's devastating. That's devastating for productivity. It's devastating for workplace outcomes. So it's maintaining focus is something that you can achieve, and it's building better engagement. And better engagement leads to connectivity between colleagues, which leads to greater stimuli of ideas, but it also leads to friendship in the workplace. And that sounds a bit soft and a bit fluffy, but actually it's proven statistically that when people connect with each other in workplace, they stay longer. They are less likely to look for other jobs. So these are shortcuts to preventing those epidemic problems that workplace is facing at the moment. So if you're not looking at inclusivity as a tool to solve your long-term epidemics in workplace, you're missing a trick. I think it's that fundamental.
Yeah. And I suppose the workplace environment, as you've said, is a tool in helping to build that inclusive culture and changing behaviors within the workforce as well.
There's multiple facets of it. They say flexible working builds trust. They talk about, giving good information and clear instructions and expectations builds or reduces anxiety around expectations, helps people to understand, what they're expected to do and how they, and then they can build plans for how to achieve those things. But the workplace also says to people, this is what I think of you. This is the environment that I'm going to give you in which I want you to achieve those things that I've told you as part of your remit. And so if that environment is cold, soulless, thinks about one type of mind and doesn't think about multiple types of mind, if you're if it's built for rows and rows of desks and everybody comes in and you don't know where you're going to be sitting from one day to the next, if you don't cater and include and consider the anxieties that those things create, then actually you're saying to your workforce, do what I say, don't do what I do. Here's my loudspeaker saying the things that I want from you, but I'm not going to give you the tools to make sure that you're actually able to achieve those things. So I think it's an essential component.
And what do you think it is that is presenting a challenge to organizations in terms of, making that change in their workplace, in starting that journey? What do you think's preventing people at the moment from making that first step?
The same thing that's preventing us all from moving forward, I think, as a species, to speak very high level, short-termism. This notion of, and also, there's an expression in the IT world, no one ever got sacked for buying IBM. So, it's this notion of, if I do tomorrow what I was doing today, I can't get in trouble for it. But we need to break those lines. And part of the challenge is maybe we don't have the expertise in our environments at the moment. And maybe we need to learn new skills. But let me tell you, if you read that guide from Project New, and if you read either summaries or the full document from the British Standards Institute, you come away knowing what you want to do tomorrow. So you just need to assign people to invest in understanding how others are doing it. What is the guidance? What are the experts saying? What is it likely we have in our population here that we need to cater for? I think it's a great idea to consider the expression "nothing about us without us." Which just means include your people in the process. Let me tell you, if you set up a committee with leadership and employees, and you give them different objectives, you're thinking about what we need to do in the next week. You need to be thinking about what we're doing in the next 5 years, and you assign budgets to those things, and you create pilot areas where stuff can be tested, and you give people a role in those processes. People feel ownership about what's happening. You don't have to have all the expertise. Your people kind of are the experts to an extent of what they're needed. So you need to inform yourself. You need to try a few things. You need to involve people in the process. It's not rocket science, and there is a lot of great supporting material and people out there who are willing to help.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge is perhaps that for people who are looking at this at first glance, they're going, "Oh my God, that's way too much stuff. There's so much here for me to consider and to action and to change." So, from your perspective, what advice would you give someone whose responsibility it is to begin to make changes to their workplace environment to make it more inclusive and psychologically safe for their workers? What would their first steps be on that journey?
Well, I think there's three parts to that very quickly. The first one is looking at what others have done. There's this simple expression from marketing, the best way to help people, come out of that sense of anxiety is to say, here are other people like you who are facing the challenges that you're facing and have taken these actions to resolve those and have had these outcomes. So, there's the case studies out there. Look at HOK Architects, look at Project New, look at organizations that are employing those principles, and look at the simple things that they've done to take those steps. The next part then is about just involving people, I presume a lot of these organizations will already be using some sort of canvassing tool to gauge the temperature of their, especially if they have a large number of employees. Once the number gets big, you can't just have a town hall meeting and the bigger the crowd, the harder it is to sort of communicate back and forth. So you need to have some tools for that. So canvassing people about the potential for change and about what the workspace of the future looks like for them and what they expect from a future organization is very, very useful. But if I may say in the last bit, there are just some really simple things that you can start doing tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit in more detail about those in the future. But let me give you an example. If I walk into a workplace, and co-working are very guilty of this because they want to create this sort of common workspace environment. But if I walk into a workplace straight away and there's nowhere for me to go and sit with my back to the wall, it creates an immediate sense of anxiety that I can be seen from everywhere. I'm in the spotlight. People can look over my shoulders at my laptop. I can't have a video call without having some sort of neutral background. A really simple thing like tomorrow, go and look at your workplace and check, are all your desks perpendicular to the walls? In which case, nobody can sit with their back to the wall. I'm not saying they all have to be like that. That's ridiculous. That's not what I'm saying. But if none are, there is no space in your workplace where someone can sit and feel psychologically safe. So just be mindful of this notion of safety. Look at it. Is there, if someone was to walk in and they were forced to sit with an open and closing door behind them, that's traumatizing. That's now not just anxiety. You're now at the level of trauma. So just look at the workspace through somebody else's eyes. I think that's the best advice I can give. Simplest advice. Go in tomorrow and look through somebody else's eyes, because I think we're very guilty of contextualizing every challenge versus ourselves. We use ourselves as the avatar for every decision that we make. But in actual fact, we need to build empathy with different types of people, different types of minds. You need to understand that an accounting team needs a very different environment to a sales and a marketing or an event planning team. They just act differently. And even the event management team, you'll be asking them to go and do some deep work on a plan with a PowerPoint, build a PowerPoint or build an Excel. Well, they'll need to step out of the team to be able to do that and find a place to do that. If you expect them to do that with all that maelstrom going on around them, you're asking for trouble. So just look at the workspace through a different set of eyes. That would be the simplest advice I could give.
What if there are people who perhaps say that, are we babying workers too much? Does this actually make a difference? What would you say to someone who had that perspective?
I would say that fundamentally, at the end of the day, if you see it as babying, then what you need to understand is, if I may take that literal use of the word babying, your employees are in your care for a very important part of the day. And if you do want to treat them like a factory worker that sits on a production line and that does A all day long and just knocks that out of the park, then, even that you would give training to, you would create the right environment to, you would remove distractions from. If all you want is factory workers, you'd still have to provide a good environment for factory workers. But if you really want to get to the nub of why do you bring people to the office and what are you trying to get out of this, this organization that you've stood up and are now employing with people, then I would say ignore these things at your peril, and you will find that you're the ones with the high turnover and you're the ones that people are leaving behind, and you will get away with it. Don't get me wrong. You'll be like, in a month, you'll be like, see, there was no change. It was fine. Well, come back to me in a year. All right. And see the difference between the organizations that are taking care, that are not just playing lip service and not just doing this because people are complaining more and saying they need more flexibility, not just doing it because, in a reactionary way, but they're actually looking at it and going, this actually will help us to get to where we need to get to build sustainability for the future. Those are the organizations that will win, I think, in the long term.
This last question that I have is more sort of looking forward. So maybe this is for Nook or the kind of the future of workplace environments, but where do you foresee this going?
Okay, well, where is a question that I would have to put a stake in the sand? Where is it going in 5 years? Where is it going in 50 years? Is the same question, isn't it? But just one is at a different place in the trajectory. I think in the short term, I see us realizing that we don't have all of the skills that we need within the team, within the leadership team, to design the work experience of the future, and that the team needs to be enhanced with people who cared about the user experience, for example. So who don't just think about how do we squeeze more juice out of the lemon, but are actually thinking, what's the home experience like for our people? What does flex mean to our people? What does the journey, the transit, it's one of the first and second complaint most people in workplace is noise and disturbance in the workplace and the journey to get there and back. And so thinking about holistically about the workplace requires a kind of different set of understandings. I think you'll also see that the office manager, I think the office manager needs to die as a concept, and it needs to be replaced or evolved with the community manager. Someone whose task it is to understand who's part of this organization, what it is we're trying to achieve, who's here today, how they could work with each other, what projects are going on. There's a role for technology in this as well. I think technology is going to have a huge role. AI is going to have a really interesting role in the future. I see AI as a sort of personal assistant for us through our lives. I see AI as a kind of a tool for the organization too, so that we can be a bit more focused on the individual rather than on a one size fits all. And then when one AI talks to the other personal assistant to workspace, I think I can see a lot more human centric design aided by technology in the future. Technologies that help us understand where our teams are going to be, who needs to be working with each other, who lives in what area, what are they working on, could they meet at a co-working, do they need to be in the office, if they're going to be in the office, what nutrition do we need to provide in the office. It's known that having hot food available in the office brings more people into the workplace. So nutrition, healthcare, psychology, I think all of these things are going to play a really important role in the most successful companies of the future. Not all companies, that's ridiculous. There's a size of a company that can't really employ those things. But I think we can show leadership in our large organizations and in our co-working and at our events and in our organizations such as yourselves, so that then that genuine actual trickle down, I don't believe in trickle down economics, but I do believe in the trickle down of knowledge, and the trickle out or the spreading of knowledge, through organizations such as yourselves and people talking on stage and being able to hand those things across. I think that technology, I think that focus on the individual, I think the bringing in of new expertises into the team and evolving those teams' capabilities, those for me are, the elements, the ingredients of the future of work, whatever that ends up being, this hyper distributed landscape that people can work from wherever, or digitized, or people with different abilities can work from wherever. I think that's a really interesting part of it as well.
Now, before we finish, is there anything that we've not touched on that you'd like to bring to the forefront, or do you think that we have covered most areas?
Well, we covered it, but I want to press on it. There is stuff you can do tomorrow. You genuinely can walk into your office tomorrow and look at it from the point of view of looking through someone else's eyes. You can genuinely very quickly bring in a consultant for a reasonable amount of money to have a look at the work, built environment, and have a think of it from the point of view of hidden different abilities, understanding neuroinclusivity from the point of view of, these are the natural differences that exist in all of our minds, and only at a certain area of extremity does it get diagnosed. But you will not understand, and nor do you necessarily need to understand, who exactly and what type of mind they have in your organization. You just need to realize that a one size fits all fits no one, or misfits most, to put it another way. So I just want to press on the point that there are simple things that you can start doing tomorrow. And if I may, one final piece of advice is look at your space and see how it can be zoned. And zoning can be done for basically no money. because all you can do is say, okay, we're gonna draw the blinds over here to make it a slightly darker area. We're going to turn down the lighting over here. We're going to put a sign up. We're going to write library on a piece of A4 and stick it on the wall. Okay, I'm being glib, but that's how cost effective you can make a change. And by doing that, you've created something called permission signaling, where someone knows now, if I go there, there's an expectation not only on me, also I can be secure that expectation is clear to others around me. You cannot expect people to do what you want them to do if you don't tell them what you expect and you don't give them the tools to do it. So fundamentally, that at the end of the day, to just press that point home.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me and going through all of my questions this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I always find it really fascinating talking to you about all of these different elements about how we can make people feel safe within the work environment. Now, I'm also extremely excited that you're going to be joining us at the UWI European Summit event, which is taking place on the 20th of March 2024. And I'm hoping that we get to dig deeper into this topic with you during that presentation. And just to clarify for people, you'll be leading a presentation talking about how we can make the workplace environment more neuroinclusive and psychologically safe. And luckily, you'll be there the entire day to also answer any questions people might have. Is that right?
I will indeed, and I'm really looking forward to it, because I think this is also not just an opportunity for me to broadcast from the stage, which is fun and I like to do it, but also it's an opportunity for me to also, gauge the temperature of the room, listen to experts in their own fields, really get, a feeling of where people are going, where they're succeeding, where they're facing challenges that can also, help me to shape the future of my business. And when I talk on stage the next time, I can use those learnings and I can, try to join the dots between all of our organizations and all of our efforts and attempts to, be the best that we can be and to succeed as individuals and for our organizations long term.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Wonderful. Thanks very much indeed, Erica. Take care.